Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tiki Bar. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Petek Hawkins. She is calling in from Denver, Colorado. Petek, thank you so much for doing this today. How are you?
I'm doing great, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. We ask everyone in the Tiki Bar the same first question when we get started. What did you want to be when you were a kid? I would imagine you didn't know about being a VP of RevOps and enablement quite yet.
No, not at all. I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted
Interesting.
to make cartoons and design them, draw them, animate them. That was my dream job.
So were you an artist then growing up, or did you draw a lot?
No, I just loved watching cartoons and I wanted to be one who would actually make him. And now with AI, I can actually do it now.
I love that the AI unlock, being able to make your own cartoons. Did you have a favorite that was particularly inspirational to you or formative to you?
Oh gosh, there were so many of them that I would say, but the things that, the classics that come to mind is Inspector Gadget was one of my
Yeah,
favorites. That probably gives away my age a little bit. And the Flintstones is always like a good old one. But nowadays I love Bluey because, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, which really helps me watch more cartoons with them. And Bluey is also one of the family favorites.
absolutely. You learn to appreciate pretty quickly the well produced cartoons and the well produced kids books. I also have a 3 and 5 year old, as we were talking about. All right, so you want to be a cartoonist as a kid growing up. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Istanbul, Turkey.
Okay, and then when did you come to the U.S.?
I came back to the States when I was ready to go to college. I attended a global program in Indiana University for the summer. And that was about how do you, at the time, global warming was a big deal.
Mm,
And the program was around that. So you get in and then you have groups that you work with, and then you work with different countries in the world, actually with their government. So I worked in my group, we worked with Japanese government and we would have these type of calls with them. We will understand their resources, we would understand their global goals, their country goals, and then the idea was that how do you utilize their natural resources
mm.
or other resources to best benefit the world through the idea of global warming. And we did believe that Japanese had great amount of nuclear power that could create some clean energy, and that was our case. And then after that, the professor that we were working with, he said, do you want to stay and come to IU? I already took my SATs and all that stuff, so I didn't even apply. But I said, yeah, if it's an option, I would love to. And then I started going to IU.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So, did you know? Take me through like what your headspace is at that time. You're really young, college kid. You decide to move across the world. Clearly, you have some interests that you're leaning into. Do you know what you want professionally? Are you worried about moving to Bloomington, Indiana?
No, I was not worried at all, to be frank. And I have a very supportive family, so that
Mm,
really helped out at the time. I think what they knew was I could handle it. That there was just trust from the family. So that worked out. I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do. I started out with biochem because those are naturally what I'm good at, what I was good at going through regular like middle school, high school. So I said, let's continue that. Calculus is easy. So I just kind of started with that. But didn't really know what I was going to land at, which is why I ended up graduating and becoming a salesperson knocking on doors, which is where my passion was, like getting to know businesses, getting to know the why behind the business owner's ideas. And that then led me to where I am today.
so take me through that. So you go through school in Indiana, and it's time to get your first sort of real job. You end up in sales. You said, how does that actually transpire?
Yeah, so going through school, I did a lot of biochem type of stuff. And with my professors, actually, they wanted to guide me to public policy making. And I started working at some labs. And what the idea was for medical industry and health, I was doing some studies that were kind of graduate degree stuff. And what I found out is that I really didn't enjoy that. It was just a lot of crunching and analyzing numbers. Yes, I could have done it, but that's not where my passion was. And I was really interested in genuinely understanding, why do people start business? What matters to them? And how do I help them no matter what I'm selling? So, start working at a lab, didn't like it. And then when I graduated, I said, I need to be in sales. So, and I was actually pretty good at it because I was just naturally curious and not there to sell, but just to understand. So the first ever company that hired me was Aflac. So that was like right after college, only commission, no base salary. So you had to actually earn your money.
Yeah.
And I became the best one in the branch, like in the Chicago branch. We were in Chicago. I landed this big deal, and I still have people that I'm friends with in Facebook because I sold them a policy and they used it. Unfortunately, fortunately, there was a situation they had to use it, but it saved their family, their retirement. So, that's the type of stuff that I really like about sales. Um, and from there, I knew that great, now I have some sales background. I did that for a few years. I can actually get into tech because tech is where my passion was. And my first tech job ever was given to me by a company at Chicago as well. It's called C Beyond. And there I did everything from knocking on cold calling doors to being a team lead to a team manager there.
So in those early sales days, it clearly clicked for you. Like you were able to kind of move up the ladder, and you mentioned you were able to have some success as a seller. Was there a particular like deal story that you remember, or a moment when you realized, oh, okay, like this, I can do this. I'm good at this.
Yeah, I mean, I would just kind of go back to this Affleck story. That was like literally a deal that was very political because it was a big account. Apparently, there were some people who were trying to get into that account before me, and I was the newbie. And, this happens in sales, right? Like you have the politics, like I already had that lead and blah, blah, blah. What happened there was that I actually networked my way into the owner of this company. And I was just very open. I was like, look, I think I have something that I can offer to you. I believe that Affleck has been trying to get in the space, but there's just been blockers. I want to work with you as the owner on this thing because I feel like you need to hear what this can do for your employees. And I've already identified a couple of employees. I've already kind of got them ready to talk about this. And I didn't go into their office once. We always met up for coffee. It was very like a bi-directional conversation. I never once sold them, but it was more so about, here's what you're doing, here's what I'm hearing, how can I help you? And I would say I brought those people who already had in their mind that they wanted to get in there. I shared the, success with them because quite frankly, we're all in that together. And what matters is that that company's saying yes. And I think that built a trust later on. Then they let me into some of the other companies with the networks and so on. So I would say what stood out, and when I knew that I can do sales, is that I could have the right conversations at the right altitudes with the different types of stakeholders in the business. That was the first thing that gave me the confidence.
I love that story. And sales is good for those, right? Those confidence builders, because it's very binary, right? You closed the deal. I'm curious if you had any of the opposite, right? We are also in sales learning through rejection a lot of times, especially in those early days. Do you have any memories of what was the hardest part, or if there was a particular like tough customer in those early days?
So I'll say this. First of all, rejection is the game. Like we actually gamified it as a team in the early days. We're like, how many times can you get rejected today? Like you just have to gamify it because here's what we know about sales, right? The moment that you reach out to someone, it's probably just not the right time. And that's why they're saying no. They're not to take it personally. So, like that gamification was a real thing within my team. Joke about it, and we will call each other at the time. When I started sales, the Slacks and Teams didn't exist. So we would actually send text messages through the Blackberries, the times of the blackberries. But you gotta gamify it, you gotta just roll it off your shoulder. But I'll say this, I actually walked into a business, I worked for a company that was very persistent on cold calling.
Hmm.
And this guy rolled out the drawer, took out a gun, and said, if any one of you sea beyonders ever come through this door again, I'm gonna shoot someone. And here I am, not even 20 yet. I was like, oh, okay, apologies. Shut the door, called the HR, and I'm like, yeah, we should probably make sure the company knows not to come here again. So, that was my biggest, most impactful rejection. That's memorable.
Petek, I've asked that question to probably 100 people, and I have not yet heard something quite that dramatic. So good on you for sticking through it.
I did because I'm like, oh, I need to help this person out. They really don't want us here. So I was like,
No,
we're gonna
and
we're gonna figure this out.
they probably need insurance too if they're engaging in such risky behavior. But that's they probably weren't hearing that at that time. Okay, you mentioned that in your next step became a team lead and eventually into direct management. I find that when people get into management, there's usually a layer of surprise as to what it actually entails. I'm curious when you first got into it, if you experienced that at all.
Oh, absolutely. So a couple of things are so real. There is really not a playbook for management. I still feel to be true right now. That's created that can walk you through managing your own business versus managing people. And people are beautiful and complex at the same time. My biggest thing was I assume the same type of responsibility and work ethic that I have, others had too. And that was my biggest learning moment and understanding. That to me was like, oh, this should be how everybody operates. And it's not the case. It's just not the case. So I think what I had to fail over and over and over again for many times and then learn was for those people, how do I get to them as a leader? Like, how do I Ted Lasso them, right? Like that was the thing. The performance side of things and so on, it will come at that. But that, and also at the time, I was a super young manager, and the people that I worked with me sometimes were older than me, sometimes were at the same age, and we're in our 20s, like early 20s. So it wasn't as easy. But once I had that aha moment, is like, no, every person is its own unique snowflake. Then I had to learn how to appreciate those snowflakes and like let them shine. And that was the biggest, I think, moment. And I had some people that helped me out through it, just some friends and some colleagues and mentors at the time. But it's not easy to be a first time manager. Like I always feel for those first time managers.
Absolutely. What do you think has changed the most? So you're a first time manager, obviously leading teams of individuals, and now you've been leading teams of teams for some time now. And so I'm curious, like, what do you think has changed the most about Petek, the manager, from that first day to now?
Yeah, I think the appreciation of the journey. That's a big thing. And I feel like you don't have that appreciation. I shouldn't talk it for everybody, but for my case, that appreciation wasn't there when I was in my 20s, right? Appreciation for what might people be going through. I think that's a learned experience. And then how do you take those into consideration first before anything else? I think that's the biggest change.
Makes a ton of sense. I was shifting a bit more tactically. So you got into enablement early on and became an executive in enablement at a number of high growth, well-known companies. What did you see as the shift in enablement from when you started in it to now? Obviously, massive underlying technology change, a massive change in the type of talent. I'm curious how you would characterize the arc of the actual kind of function of enablement during that time.
That's a great question. So I think in early days, and enablement was first coined and recognized as a thing about 10 years ago. And that's when I started like making that shift as well. I think in early days, all of us who were just getting revenue and how revenue moves, we were just trying to create this new category of what enablement is and differentiate that from typical training. And that was a big, in my opinion, uphill battle because it was really a head scratcher for leaders to say, well, look, wait, your enablement, how's that different from training, right? Like, how did we have to create that category? How do we speak about it? How do we engage our community for them so that they can speak the same language and we can build that efficacy around what enablement is? Early days, we were doing that. We're just creating a category. Towards the middle, I would say, like, let's fast forward 5 years, we started to be known as like a household name. You're in revenue, you're in go to market, you better have enablement, otherwise you're not going to be successful, right? That became a thing. And then the revenue leaders started seeking for enablement leaders and strategy, so on and so forth. But they still don't know how to best play together. Like, still the impact of what enablement can do, taking the strategy, bring units together, create the processes with operations, and then the most important thing is drive the adoption so you can actually recognize the revenue that you're trying to get done with the strategy. That was those middle years, like, how do you play together? What does this great look like? And then now I feel like revenue enablement and operations are working so closely together, because I think what people are also seeing is that operations by itself cannot be successful, because what you're putting out there as a process is not going to be adopted on its own. Showcases every company's CRM. Nobody's CRM is great, right? So the process by itself is never going to be adopted. It's just, how do you tie it to the overall strategy, how people do their work, and how they see value in bringing that in. Without that, you cannot be successful. So in a way, I did start seeing in some of the organization, like, enablement became this like center of how you get things done in the business. And I feel like we're in that era now. And the other cool thing that I'm seeing is that with AI come into play, you got to train the dragon being the AI. If you got the enablement principles right, you're going to get there really fast. And I'm seeing some of my enablement professionals really getting it, because you're going to have agentic sellers, you're going to have agentic success, and all those are trained with the same exact mentality as how you would do humans. And you have to integrate them together. So I feel like in the next 5 years, I feel like enablement is going to become even more important to organizations. And I did an entire presentation on this to say, AI is not going to transform companies. Enablement is. And I truly believe in that.
I love that. And I saw the presentation. It was fantastic. I want to talk about, you mentioned a relationship between operations and enablement there, and sort of a togetherness. You own operations. Your company, you're the VP of revenue operations as well. What was the most surprising thing for you once you got under the hood and fully owned that portion of the business?
Yeah, so I was actually hired as enablement because that's what I do. That's my superpower. I drive transformation. And what ended up happening is that you get in and they say, we want you to increase revenue performance from this to this. Go have at it. And then for me to do that, you do some due diligence and you get in and see, okay, how are the systems working? How's the process that's identified? Where are the bottlenecks? Is this a skill or a real thing? Is this a process thing? Like, you need to ask all these questions if you understand the revenue architecture, so that you can pinpoint the real root causes of what's keeping scale from happening. And when I started asking those questions, I started getting different answers from all over the place, that like not one single answer met the other. There was not like really good documentation. So I started doing these things because I'm like, well, hey, y'all want me to go enable. I cannot enable on something that's not documented. And so I just kind of started doing these things, and then they're like, by the way, why don't you just own it, because you're doing it? And I didn't really want operations because, it's kind of boring, to be frank. I'm just going to put it out there. I really love the transformation, like seeing the change and so on, the process and so on. I'm like, yeah, that needs to get done. But the real benefit is when that actually gets adopted, when that actually drives the results. That's kind of what I like. So bizarre thing to me was, oh my gosh, we have such an amazingly scaling company without these like really fundamental things of how things get done. And that was really probably not the answer that you want to hear.
I mean, I think it's a really organic answer, right? Is you came in and provided this audit for yourself at first, then for the company. And so to me, it seems really natural. And I enjoy that perspective because you have the sales lens that you started with, the enablement, and then rounding it out through operations. I'm curious, through all of that, is there like a strength or a skill that you've developed that you maybe just like wouldn't have expected from yourself when you got started?
Yeah, turns out I'm a really good human wrangler. It did not.
You need that.
Yeah. The other thing is, I think I'm really good at bringing clarity to the things that seem really complex to the business, especially for like a larger business or a scaling business. There's a lot that's happening. So, what I found out to be as a strength of mine is being in the seat I'm in and being in the different conversations where people are kind of starting to unravel just to bring them back in and simplify what we're looking at. You know, hey, like we're starting to just kind of get out of control. Let's bring it in because this is actually simpler than what we're making out to be. And then being able to connect those siloed efforts and say, well, you're talking about the same thing as this person. And quite frankly, it's the same coin with the different sides. Let's bring those together. I think that's really helped out. And the other thing that I would say is that I'm apparently a really great activator, but there are goods and bad parts of it. So I'm just known to be an activator.
What do you mean by that? Good and bad parts of being a good activator?
So, the good part is that you are finding something that needs to get done. And I feel like the biggest opportunity in this whole world, in the businesses right now, is taking an action. Like, if you're not taking an action, especially with AI, there are people who are surpassing you, passing you day in, day out. And you got to take an action. Sometimes we kind of get in our heads as a leader to say, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right activation? Is this the right thing to go after? And that can cost you inaction and being behind of the competition. The bad side of the coin is sometimes in my mind, again, I simplify it to a degree that's so simplified that I need to maybe take a moment to say, have we had all the parties, understanding what is it going to mean for them to activate this thing? And then that happens a little later. So that's the good and the bad of this activation.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think right now, especially with AI, like it's very easy to spend time over engineering. And so it's thinking, okay, I want to focus on clarity, and action makes total sense to me. And I've done both as well. I mean, it makes sense as a potential error is to say, okay, we could have thought this through easily, but the other side of the coin is right there. Which leads me to my next question. What is something, so you obviously have made it to the executive ranks across a number of companies, a number of functions. What is something that you are still trying to work on, a skill that you're trying to build, something that you're really interested in professionally?
Patience. Patience. It's just that because there's just so much opportunity, again, I am a high achiever. I'm a type A. That's just who I am. I cannot change my personality. And with that sometimes comes impatience. And I've learned so much about how to control that, but I feel like there's also so much more to learn about it. For that, I lean into my people to tell me, walk me through it. And by the way, they know that's open and totally welcome. But I would say that's the number one thing, patience, that I still need to work on.
That's a good answer. I like that. Okay. Now, I would imagine you occasionally get reached out to by mentor or mentees, I should say. This may be someone who's behind you in the career journey or just starting out, and they say, Petek, I'm looking for some general advice. I want to get to where you are. What would you advise me to do?
I mean, the first thing I say is, do you know what you want out of life? I mean, that's the first thing. That's the most important thing. Because if you're unclear about that, no matter what the direction that we're going is not going to be the right direction for you. Do you know day in, day out, what you can do that also earns you money? And I know this is super millennial of me, but that's just how I think about it. But like, what can you do day in, day out that gives you that sense of accomplishment and happiness? So the first thing is know that, put it in a piece of paper and put it in front of you. So every day you take a look at it without even thinking about it unconsciously, you're going to look at it and you're going to work towards it. That's number one thing. Start from there. And then everything else is obviously, I just want to know the person, what they want to work on, so on and so forth. And then the other thing is don't always think linear, because I feel like linear happens to so far and few between. I feel like most amazing stories that I hear comes from the movements that are non-linear and kind of all over the place. But then like the lotus flower, it just appears so beautifully at the end.
Okay. I in my research, I found that you're a yoga instructor, so this is coming out now. I like this. That's great advice. Find your North Star and don't be afraid to take a side step. I think is something we can all learn from. Now, my last question is a very selfish question that I ask everyone in the Tiki Bar is what is something that you find yourself recommending to everyone? Something outside of work, could be a book, could be a podcast, could be a yoga practice, just something that you find yourself telling everyone, hey, I think you should do this.
There's this one book that I love. And I like just recently I recommended to a few people because of that. This is coming to mind. But I first read the book, I want to say when I was 17. And I read it again and again, like every 2 years, and it just hits the mark. And it's called The Alchemist.
Yeah.
And I would say in that book, there are moments where, no matter how life is good, how things happen, there comes a moment where you're like, oh, maybe I should just stop, right? And I feel like that book does a really good job to kind of wrangle you back up and just feel good about where you are in life, no matter where you're in life. So read the book Alchemist and take a walk every day. Have a walk and talk. I cannot tell you how many more productive conversations that I have with colleagues and team members when I say, let's shut off the screen, grab your phone, we're going to go for a walk, and we're going to talk at the same time. And that's just like by itself is an amazing add on to your day that you can be so much more productive.
Excellent advice. Petek, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to sit with us. I'm sure everyone will be interested in hearing more, and we'll, of course, link your LinkedIn in the show notes and things like that, but we really appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Have a good one.